Welcome to the podcast, Entrepreneur Perspectives, introspective podcast conversations helping build and protect your business one podcast at a time. A CASSource production. This is an episode featuring the co-founder of FreshBooks, Mike McDerment. This episode exists because of CASSource. CASSource is your content team. You know how many business leaders need help communicating their story? That's what we do. Content strategy, creation, and distribution for business leaders. This provides opportunities, relationships, and a platform for you and your business. Why do we do this? Because at CASSource, we exist to help you create and share amazing content. And yes, you should have a podcast. We'll help you. Learn more by visiting CAScontent.com. FreshBooks is considered by many the number one accounting software in the cloud, designed exclusively for freelancers and growing service-based business owners. Mike is all about the entrepreneurial journey and his story of growing FreshBooks from his parents' basement to leading a business used by over 24 million showcases just that. Mike shares his ups and downs as an entrepreneur throughout the conversation. We talk about changes, exploration, value, and much more. Be sure to check out FreshBooks at freshbooks.com and review the show notes to find the link to download Mike's free book, Breaking the Time Barrier. And now we welcome the co-founder of FreshBooks, Mike McDerment. It's introspective in many ways. You've been on a lot of podcasts, and I've had the opportunity to check out a lot what you're doing. Obviously, I know of FreshBooks, being a small business owner myself, and cloud computing, and is doing all these different things. And I run across it all the time. And the team reached out and mentioned FreshBooks, and the CEO, the founder, wants to come on the podcast. I mean, what an opportunity for us, for myself, for my team here to be able to hear this, because that's what we use the podcast for. It's a way to have a conversation. If no one ever listens to it, well, you know what? Selfishly, I got to have the conversation, and then it becomes required listening for the team. And we work with small businesses, medium-sized businesses all the time on a daily basis. And so we put it right in front of them, say, you should check this out. And I think there's just a lot of stories, and you've shared a lot, and we'll resource a lot of those conversations that you've already had and talked about your book and talk about your beginnings and being in your parents' basement, right, for 3.5 years. But I thought it'd be interesting to have this conversation start. This word I was thinking about, I was going through it, and I'm seeing a lot of these feedback that I was getting just in the articles I had read with change, right? FreshBooks, with yourself, with coming with a CEO and moving on from perhaps being the CEO, and then also changes in your software, right? And where the software is, where it was and where it is today. So, and then changing life, right? Changing the stuff that we were just talking about earlier, where you can't cross the borders. You can only do certain things. Everyone's remote. Everyone's forced to change. It's like, well, I don't want to change. Well, you don't have a choice. You have to change. So what's it been like for you? Obviously, with the pandemic coming into a new year, so we're changing to 2021 and having these significant changes take place for you personally, professionally, and in your business.
Yeah, so it has been a lot of change for me on a bunch of levels. Our third child was born my wife and I, our third kid was born on the first day that Canada had a confirmed case of COVID. And so kind of a bit of a backdrop. And then we had to spend the next week in the hospital because he was in NICU for a little bit. He's perfectly fine now, but we started to see people showing up with masks, and it was getting a little bit weird. And then Canada really went nuts in kind of mid-March timeframe, and things started getting locked down here around then. And so having a third child, being in lockdown, I think like a lot of people, just the family aspect of it's been pretty intense. We have 3 children under 5 and being sort of cooped up at home with no school for the first 6 months for sure, and all that stuff. And I'm running a company, and we're like, hey, we don't know what's going to happen.
Sure.
The financial outlook is like not awesome when these kinds of pressures come for the small business community. And we just really didn't know what was going to happen. So we had to kind of rejig all our plans. That was a bit of a fire drill at the April timeframe. And anyhow, we've been very fortunate. The business has performed and continue to perform really well. And lots of people need what we do. And especially if you really want to know where your finances stand when things are so uncertain in the world. And so got family change, got pandemic-induced business change, and just, we just have a million things going on in FreshBooks anyways. So there's just a lot of day-to-day change there. And so that's a little bit of a window into my year. I mean, just interesting on the FreshBooks side, to give you more of an example. Not only do we have to kind of reboot the financials, everything, in the past 18 months, we've gone from one company headquartered in Toronto for like 15 years or more to buying our first company and opening up 3 other offices. So now we have 5 offices in 5 countries. And so the whole push to remote work and everything has been just an interesting journey, if you will, to go on like everyone else. So I don't know that we have anything special there, but I guess the point is it's been a lot of change.
Yeah, it
last
has.
year or so.
Well, in some of the stuff, I think people have enjoyed the opportunity to say to work remote, right? So there is change that people do like, and there's change that people don't like. And like looking at FreshBooks, from what I see is you had a classic version of what FreshBooks provides, and it's been updated since then. And I think that's right. You can tell us the dates as to when those changes took place and perhaps the feedback with it. But a lot of people are like, hey, I've been used to the same software, this same program for the X amount of years, and all of a sudden it's changed on me. And inevitably, that's probably going to bring in skepticism because I just want it the way I had it. Why do we have to change it? And there could be negative feedback. I'm sure there's positive feedback as well, but that's a major change that impacts all your users and everyone at your company.
Oh, 100%. We launched new FreshBooks over 4 years ago now. And so literally like 90+% of people are over on new FreshBooks now. And some of those people, as they've moved over, said, yeah, I'm not so happy now. And it's what we have seen in the data is that's how it kind of starts. And satisfaction drops because it's like, hey, I had to move to something else. And then over time, the familiarity grows with the new thing. And then the satisfaction kind of goes to parity or better with where it was in Classic. So that is the change curve that people go through. And we've tried to, over 4 years, really let people kind of take their time and offer people the ability to move back if they didn't like it as much.
Right.
And we're kind of in the last phases now of really just trying to get everyone on new FreshBooks. And so that's a little bit of a different dynamic. Yeah.
That's where I can see it too, right? Because a new service rolls out, and then you have the people at the very beginning be like, I want the new, I don't care what it is, just give me the beta, right? And then there's other people who are like, I'm going to hold on to this thing for dear life for the 4 years I can possibly hold on to it. So eventually they're going to have to switch because the legacy systems won't be supported much longer. And they're like, they never wanted to switch in the first place. So you might see that come out. And that's certainly an opportunity for a lot of people because that is the time where they can get on social media and talk about it. How does that impact you when you start seeing some criticism? Like you become a larger company. At one point, you have a few users and it's no big deal because you can handle that with a phone call. Well, now it's like you can't just get on the phone and talk to all your 24 million plus users that you have. How does negativity, how does concerns like that impact you personally?
I'm going to talk about it out of like my rational mind and then my emotional self. So the rational mind knows that in terms of air quotes, the percentage of people who are upset, it is actually very, very small. But when you have large numbers, that small percentage is a huge number of people. And so I think the more relevant part is the second part is as a company, we try to do what we call live the 4 E's, execute extraordinary experiences every day, which is we really care about the experience. If you phone us on support, you're going to experience a different kind of company. When we build the software, we really try and do it in a way that is specific to our segments and makes us easier to use and different and more appropriate for the people we do serve. And so anytime somebody's unhappy on a personal level, I'll just say like, I'm almost 2 decades in, like it hurts to the core. Like I don't want anyone to be dissatisfied. And so we take that very seriously. And I've spent some time over the last while sharing and really actually soliciting the discontent from some of our customers to share it with our product team and our engineers to go ahead and say, hey, like I agree with these gaps.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and finish off some of these pieces. And so I guess there's a roundabout way of saying, hey, I think the feedback is constructive. Sometimes it could be framed in a more constructive way, but nonetheless, I don't want to take anything away from anyone's personal experience. I think that's right. And we're trying to channel the feedback where we can. And I think to my mind, there's some of the feedback is warranted. Some of it is probably just bred out of, hey, I'm not familiar with it yet. So it's a mix. But yeah, the point is, hey, it hurts every time.
Yeah. It makes sense that you're kind of exploring the feedback, right? You're taking a step back and saying, hey, what's going on here? Because it seems to me through some things that I've seen about you is you have this exploration type of mind. And that seems to be like, that's at the core of FreshBooks that perhaps is even at the infancy of FreshBooks of you just come across something and here's this opportunity and you're like, what is that? Like, let's lean into that. And now you're doing it even with customer feedback. But that word exploration, it seems to have come up. Maybe you've said it, it's written down in different ways. Has that been a part of like encouraging other people, whether it's your company or other business owners, small business owners, to continue to explore to see what could be out there? Because even going back to the beginning of FreshBooks and how that started, right? So exploration, when that comes into your mind, like what does that make you think of?
Well, I think for me, that is the entrepreneurial journey. There's a variety of things you explore. It's who is our customer? And once we've determined who is our customer, we explore, well, what do they really want? What's the pain and how do we serve them well? And then we start to explore like what might we build that might address that? And then, okay, those are the features and function. How might we build an experience that does it? And then, how do we accommodate them if they're not on the happy path and we need to serve them in some way with service? And what is the best way to do that? So I don't know that I've had this exact conversation before around exploration, but what I would say is I, at least over the last couple of decades, have built a bit of a track record for following my nose.
Yeah.
And sort of smelling things out. And in this case, Q4 last year was some people we asked to move to new FreshBooks. And, I think they had some valid concerns about making that transition. And so let's get curious about that and let's find the pattern in it and let's resolve it because I think they're right. That kind of thing. But it's a lot of intuition, I think, is in exploration. That's why I like being an entrepreneur.
Yeah. It could lead you down so many different paths, right? Like whether it's a conversation or you're exploring like, hey, what is this going to look like in the future? Having that visionary mindset, because that's part of the thing of being an entrepreneur is we can go in the wrong direction, but you really don't know that until you get to that step. So do you look back and regret like, wow, I shouldn't have made that decision, but you did the best you could with the information that you had at that time. So going back a little bit, because I think it's important to understand, like you're talking about all these countries that you guys are in, you're in 5 countries, all these people, 24 million users plus and growing on a daily basis, I'm sure. And people are looking to start small businesses. We see it constantly. People are like, well, I have this idea and I want to put it out there. And here they go. And next thing you know, they're a potential candidate to be a client for FreshBooks. But it's not to necessarily get in the origin story, but I think it's important here because I do want to understand it a little bit of your origin story, the beginning of FreshBooks and how you got started and why you got started.
Yeah, so FreshBooks was not on my conscious mind when the spark really happened. I was using Word and Excel to run a small design firm I had. I'd send my invoices out using Word and Excel. One day I accidentally saved over an invoice and said, there's just got to be a better way to do this. And I went ahead and I built a simple way to create and send and present invoices to my clients. And then one of the people who was doing contract work with me at the time, this guy, Joe Sawada, he took an interest in it. We made that a side project that ultimately turned into the company FreshBooks. But what was interesting was I had things that were bothering my subconscious mind and chewing up my physical time around that time. I was always wondering who owed me money and how much. When you use something like Word and Excel, like you don't know that. And as a small business owner, like you have to know that. And so every 6 or 8 weeks, I'd find myself going through my inbox and trying to figure out, did I send the invoice? Did they write back? Checking my mail. Like half the time I had 2 or 3 checks sitting on my desk. I hadn't taken to the bank to cash. It's like, oh, I better go and do that. So that was the subconscious, like, hey, who owes me money? How much do they owe me? Was the subconscious thought that was really in the back of my mind, sometimes the front of my mind, when I saved over that invoice and said, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so then I was like, okay, how might I explore building something that satisfies that need?
Yeah. So when you do this and you say, okay, I'm going in this direction, are you stopping this design agency that you have? Are you stopping payments from coming in? Are you running both at the same time to stay alive?
So one of the things I was thinking about for whatever reason this morning when I went for my morning walk was, my approach to getting things done is to just commit myself to doing them. And so I sort of don't stand back and think too much. I say, okay, I'm going to do it. And then I just trust I'll figure out how to get it done on the way. Because I think the alternative would be to sit back, overthink it and kind of do nothing. And obviously you have to be selective with how many of those things you take on. But that is my personal approach for sorting this kind of thing out.
Sure. So you see the vision because you can overplan this, you can overthink it and kind of get lost because you really haven't even gotten started on it.
Yeah, I think what happens for me is I see something, I guess, down the road. I guess that's something I do. Not everybody does. I can see a picture of something or I have a directional feeling that there might be something, somewhere. And then it's just like, okay, once I have that, and if it feels like something interesting enough to pursue, those are the 2 things I care about. Can I see something? Am I interested enough in pursuing it? And then it's like, don't think.
Okay.
Just try and do it.
That's interesting because are you blocking out, right? Because now you have different people. It's like, whether it's family, friends, people in business. Like, well, hold on a second. You were doing this. Maybe you're successful at it. How are you going to switch and pivot this? So you have other people on the other side be like, wow, this is fascinating. Push down this. I'm excited for it. Is it, again, everybody's going to handle this differently. Are you blocking these things out? Or are you just completely, like you just said, I'm not even thinking about it. I don't care what they say. I know where I'm going. I'm just going to go do it.
I would say, I'm sort of not interested in the feedback at that stage because maybe I've seen something and I think I can get there. And that's kind of all that matters at that point. And then it's like, okay, the journey, right? And
Right.
we had all kinds of people for years telling us FreshBooks would, literally like people I went to for advice and whatever, their advice was like, don't even bother. Like, you're never going to make this work.
Okay.
So you don't want to dismiss anybody's point of view,
Right.
but it doesn't mean you act on it, right? So it's like, okay, duly noted, and off I go.
Right.
I'm going to keep going. And to be honest, I think, and this is important, as an entrepreneur, like we kept going when people told us no, and there was no, like we had, in 2 years, we had 10 paying customers. We're making $100 a month, right? 2 years in. But we loved what we were doing. And there was a reason to believe that this could go somewhere. Again, I don't think at that point in time, I didn't have an exacting vision of where we were going, but the direction was very clear.
Somewhat of an aim of, like you said.
Yeah, like it felt like if we go in this way long enough, like the path might become clear. Right now, it's all bushes and I can't see a foot in front of my face, but there's something on the other side of this jungle.
Yeah, I see that because I remember hearing it. I'm in the insurance business, or was in the insurance business. We still have that. But I started creating content, started telling stories because I was getting so tired of like what the life insurance industry was like and how people would share their stories. And it was becoming boring. So we start creating content. Well, people are like, well, you can't do that. You're in this business. So how can you shift? But there was enough people, even myself included, like you said, to block that out and say, well, this is what I'm enjoying doing. And like you're saying, it's interesting to hear it, to say, there's something there and I want to keep going down that path. So it leads into content that leads into some other business owner coming saying, hey, can you do that for me? And to another person saying it. And who did that for them? Oh, it was this company. And next thing you know, we created a content marketing agency on the heels of all that because of something that we saw. But just realizing, I think it's important. Of course, you had people that were going to doubt FreshBooks. But at the same time, I think it's good for other people to hear from the founder to say, this is what we dealt with, right? People were saying, this is crazy. Why would you even waste another minute on this? This will never work, because they are dealing with that. And then you can grow from it. And then you get into this point where you start having some success and inevitably you're going to scale up. Like to run the company you're running, you're going to have a lot of people working for you. So now you're dealing with scale and hiring and firing, and curious as to when you start bringing on like not the founders, like you're kind of past that point of the very infancy of the beginning of this company to now we need to bring in people to help us do this. Like the hiring process for you, was this comfortable? Was this something you had maybe at some point in your life thought like, I really want to have this very large company with all these employees I have to go hire? Or was this like scaring you out of your mind?
Definitely the latter.
Okay.
For two reasons. One, I'd never hired anybody in my life. And I'll tell you, hiring is definitely like a pattern recognition thing. We had no idea how to hire. And the good news is I've hired a few hundred people now. And so I have a pretty good idea how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But back then I had no clue. And I think to some extent that probably slowed our progress, but I don't have any regrets either. So we can talk about that. And then the other part was, I was terrified of losing our culture and our customer focus as we scale. And I would say that was like a healthy paranoia. I think we've done actually a really great job of that. And FreshBooks is still very customer focused. Everyone still spends their first month in customer service when they go. And it's not just me who feels pain when a customer says something online that's like they're less than happy. That hurts pretty much everybody. And so I think we've done a great job with that. We got to continue to be vigilant, and there's always work to do. But I think those two things were terrifying. And so I'd never managed anybody. I'd never hired anybody. I'd never hired anybody who managed anybody. Like never worked anywhere. So I had no clue.
Yeah, it is difficult. The company that I'm running, it's not to that level of having this many people, but I'm starting to see some mistakes earlier on that I made is because you can tell me your experiences with it, whether you, let's say, like this individual, you really believe this individual can do it, but then there was some like cues at some point that this wasn't going to work, but you would make an excuse to say that they can get past that. And then the cue would keep coming up in other ways to say, no, but they keep doing it over and over again. It's very frustrating to say, I've talked to someone, I just had someone recently that I had spoken with that was in the military, and he used the word no compromise. And he's not in the military anymore, he's at a bank, and there's no compromise. So the people he brings on his team, he does not compromise. Whatever his values are, what he's trying to get, whatever is needed, that he just won't compromise on that. What's been your experience with that? Because sometimes you'll come across this person, you think they have everything, and somehow, some way, they present this and you're like, ooh, that's going to be a problem, but I'm going to look past it right now because we're going to get past it. Like, what's that experience been like for you?
Yeah. I think there's two classes of problems in this. One is of values. Let's just scratch the record. We're going to have one conversation. You're not allowed to make that mistake again, period. And then they're gone if that repeats itself. And then there's one of competence. So competence is it your first time doing it? Is it taking you a long time to figure it out? Are you trying? Can I see growth? Are you progressing? Are you going to get there? Or, hey, is this just kind of beyond you? Or you're just frankly not somebody who's committed enough or ambitious enough to get it done. And so I think the first thing to do is recognize there's two kinds of problems you're dealing with in these scenarios and know which one you're dealing with. Because I would say values is a complete non-starter, whereas is somebody's competence, if they have the right mindset, and I think this is important, but there's a tell in here as well. If they have a growth mindset where they're going to challenge themselves, maybe they won't get it right all the time, but they're progressive and you can see them learning. They're making every effort to do better. They're doing things like presenting to you. I know I did this. Here, it didn't go well, but I learned from this. That's like, okay, I can work with someone like that. If somebody thinks they have the answers and continues to demonstrate that they're not getting it done, that's like, I'd say, a more fixed mindset. And it will thwart their ability to grow and develop and probably makes them, at least for working with me, like just not a suitable partner or even person I'd even really want to have in the organization.
Sure. I think it's interesting too, because you have this large organization. And so you're definitely supporting small businesses. You're supporting the entrepreneur community, right? But at the same time, you're supporting people that are getting going in their career, that are in their career and that want to work for a large business. And of course, we obviously see it. This journey that you talk about of being an entrepreneur, it's not for everybody. Like you have to have some nerve to want to go down this path and do those things. Just like if someone wants to work at a company and be employee number 100 at FreshBooks, there's nothing wrong with that either. And here you are kind of sitting on both sides of it in a positive way to say, hey, we want to help the small business owner. We want to help the entrepreneur. We also want to help the people come work at a great company with a great culture and learn about customer service like they perhaps have never learned about it. And most likely something that college, for example, can never teach you, how to handle people, how to deal with these types of things. And do you see it like that? Do you think about like, we're on both sides of this thing and this is a lot of fun?
Well, I think about it like this. I think you need two things in business, but I would go further and say in life to be successful. It is shared values and alignment. So if you have a group of people and they have shared values and those you do not compromise on, full stop. And then you have alignment with, hey, where we're going and why. I think you can go a great, great distance. And I think, there are a lot of people who are great people who are going to share your values. They may just be at a different stage of your career and don't know how to contribute just yet, or have some starter place they can contribute. And over time, you can grow them so they can help contribute in more ways. And I think we have a lot of people who join FreshBooks just because we serve small business owners. And they maybe had a family member or they tried something themselves one time and they kind of recognize like really to serve this market is just a special honor, right? And they get up every day saying, hey, I really want to make a difference for these owners out there because it's hard.
Yeah. There's something in that too. Like when someone can recognize their importance of their job, whether they're sweeping the floors or helping a small business owner, whatever that thing is that they're doing, there's something to that and you can make the most of it. And we see people all the time. I've seen people who are controlling the crosswalk and they're dancing and they're having fun and they're engaging with the kids and the parents. Like you make the most of whatever that situation is. And I think there's a lot in that. And I hear a lot of what you're saying too, is like these stories are coming out in the way you talk. And you mentioned, I think even maybe during this discovery phase that you have at the very beginning of blogging about it, of documenting this journey of this process and what you're thinking about. And perhaps it's almost like journaling, but then you're letting other people in on it while you might have had your own stories internally as well. But content and going back to that, clearly it's a big deal for you because we hear from you, we hear from your team, reach out, we start looking around and there you are, like you're on all these different podcasts. There's these stories about where you've been and what you're doing and clearly getting out there and sharing these stories is of utmost importance to you. So people can kind of get maybe behind the hood, get like little documentary going of the story, even if it's through short form blogs. Why is content, why is appearing on a podcast like this such an important thing for you and FreshBooks?
Yeah, I think there's the kind of scratching at maybe the personal and the professional reason. So let's start with the more crass is like, hey, this is a way to get the word out that FreshBooks exists and what have you, which is, it is a form of marketing. So there's no question that that's part of the calculus. But on a very personal note, the shows I like doing the best are shows like this they're more about the journey. Right. And you're going to have some entrepreneurs or some owners listening who are trying to really find their way and recognize that it's not easy. And so to the extent anything I can participate in is soul food, I call it soul food for entrepreneurs, right? Like if somebody can listen to this and get some inspiration and kind of wants to keep going or get some nugget around how do I hire and why, for me, as a kind of personal mission standpoint, like that is enormously gratifying. And I know that when I got started out, like I listened to a lot of podcasts.
Yeah.
That was part of the thing that got me through, because to keep your batteries filled and have the perseverance to really start and own and run a business is, I think, hugely underestimated by a lot of people. If you don't do it, no one else is going to.
Right.
That has its pluses, but it also has the things that kind of wear on you. You just need people to help lift you up. So I'm grateful for and privileged to have the opportunity to share some of what I've learned, and in hopes that other people can draw from it when they need it.
Yeah. I think it's vitally important. And you said it, and I'd seen you had said that before, that you've listened to podcasts, especially when you were starting out. I remember before I started this business over 8 years ago, I really started reading seriously podcasts. And it's like you said, you just need that little bit of extra something to get going, and for whatever it is, and you get addicted to it. And then you have the opportunity like that you're doing to appear on other podcasts, to help share your journey, to share your story, because you're giving back to this, like I said before, this entrepreneur community. And you would touch on this before as well. And you said the word, and you used the word regrets. And I think we touched on it slightly. And I think what I would hear you say is that it's not the regrets, because you're going to make mistakes. And I think you even talk about the mistakes that you've made at FreshBooks and in your career. And you probably had to go through it. You can answer this now, but you probably had to go through a lot of these mistakes. And so you don't see them as regrets, you see them as experiences. But touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple thoughts. There's no failure, there's only learning. And I can't think of a time, maybe one or two times, but they're probably more almost like more micro interpersonal, things where I just feel like I just sort of straight up failed, or I had a presentation and I just didn't succeed in communicating what I wanted to. And yes, I'll learn a lot from it, but I'd say, hey, I failed there. But mostly I don't see failure. I just see learning. And I think that is the right mindset. But I will go ahead and say this. And again, I don't know if it's the pandemic or whatever it is, but I will say I, for a lot of my life, was very, very hard on myself. Very, very hard on myself. To the point of it being, and I'll just go put myself on the couch here for a second. I had a father who was very, very hard on himself. And so you kind of learn this and you inherit this as a way, and like painfully hard on himself. And I really adopted that for a lot of years. And then I was playing sports like pretty competitively. And what I found is I would spend all week thinking about, I was like the one like drop pass. Let's think about it that way. And all week I'd think about one drop pass. I would never think about the 130 catches. I would think about the one drop, and I would rile myself up, and then I'd go do it again the next weekend or whatever it was, go to a tournament. And that somewhere along the line, I was playing, the game I was playing was Ultimate Frisbee, and I was really into it. And it was played like internationally and all this stuff. And I was playing one day with this woman. I was like beating myself up after something didn't go the way I wanted. She was just like, oh, you're so hard on yourself. And for the first time kind of in my life, I was like, first of all, that was a kind thing to say. And I was like, yes, I am. And then, but I really reflected on it. She got through to me in a way that I don't think I'd ever seen it before. And so my point is, I think in being an entrepreneur, but also in life, like you have to go easy on yourself. That doesn't mean you don't work in a determined way. It just means that should you make a mistake, did you do it on purpose? No. Then like, what is there to be upset about? Right? Like, let's just move on, accept that it happened, and move on as fast as you can. And I think I've developed a good capacity to do that.
Yeah, it seemed to be that there was this awareness that happened for you. And I see that as well. Once you become aware that I am being hard on myself, let me think about that. And then you can deal with it and move forward. That is the growth mindset, right? That is the way that you can say, okay, well, I am being hard on myself. And how can I fix this going forward? But there's that awareness, right? It goes back to that piece of it, because so often we go through things and you're not even aware that you're doing it, right? Like maybe you are being hard on yourself, but you're not really thinking about it. You're not allowing yourself to kind of go, like you said, put yourself on the couch, which I think is a great way to say it.
Yeah, I think that is kind of life. And I think one of the things I've come around to is when you see these people, and I would not put myself in this class. I think there's people who've just accomplished so much more than me and that I'm completely blown away by and inspired by. And at the end of the day, they're just people. And so what's different there? And I think it really comes down to, I just have this belief inside of everybody is the capacity to basically do anything or to be just frighteningly successful at something. And maybe you haven't found that thing where you have your super strength so you can do it. And I would say, if you believe that, and you got to decide for yourself if you do, but I do, then it's like, how do I stop myself from getting in the way of myself is kind of like the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of starting from a position of, I am probably making this situation more difficult. I probably have something to learn. What am I missing? I think are just the kinds of questions that either unconsciously or consciously, I try to ask myself to kind of unblock me and get me up another level. And I think that's, it's hard work, but that is the journey.
Is that then when you start realizing that the value you're providing, because you talk about this, right? Because FreshBooks, and we're talking about invoicing, and we're talking about, okay, there's someone out there and they create something for somebody else, and there's a value to that. And people have a hard time understanding what they're worth, right? And you clearly talk about this a lot. But there is like, I don't know if it's an imposter syndrome or if what that might be that's preventing them from saying, this is my value and holding firm to that. I mean, you've written a book about this, right? Because you hear it all the time. Well, this is how much it costs and I charge this much per hour versus this much value. And I don't know the story of it, but like, what was it? The assembly line is broken and there's all these different people that come in to fix the assembly line and no one can fix the assembly line. Or what they do is they charge so much money, someone comes in, they fix it in 5 minutes and that's $100,000. That only took you 5 minutes. Yeah, but you didn't pay for the 5 minutes. You paid for my years and years of expertise and experience. That's the cost. And people happily pay that. But you start getting into this whole thing of it takes a while for someone to have that, I don't know what the word is, if it's ability or nerve or just the realization that this is what my value is. Talk about that a little bit as far as it relates to value, because I think that's like this understanding, this awareness of actually I'm bringing something to the table. This is how much it costs. And people will do it, right? And they'll gladly do it.
Yeah. So we'll take one quick step back and say, yes, I did write a book on how to price your services. It's called Breaking the Time Barrier. Anyone can download it for free. It takes about 45 minutes to read, maybe an hour, just to give you a little cushion. And its purpose, its express purpose was to help you shift your mindset on how to think about the value you bring and go from like hey, I have an hourly rate, or this is how much the materials cost, I charge you a little more, to understanding that people are hiring you to solve a problem. And if you can go ahead and understand how valuable is that problem to them and price your services accordingly, you can start to detach yourself from how many hours you work in a day and be very valuable in the eyes of your customers. So it is on the one hand, sleight of hand, but on the other hand, you have to have a whole bunch of competence, which I think is another part of this, like to back it up and sort of deliver the results, or it won't go well. You will not have happy customers. You will not get referrals. You will not have more business, which is really, referrals is the heart of how most small business owners do to win new clients and new business. And so that's a bit of a primer. And so by all means, check out the book. Again, it's free. Download it. Check it out. FreshBooks, Breaking the Time Barrier. But with that as a bit of a backdrop, yeah, I think what you're heading at is you need to develop some area of competence. And ideally, you focus on a narrow wedge where you can have compounding levels of competence. Like the person who fixed that assembly line was probably not just a general mill worker or something along these lines. They actually specialized probably in assembly lines.
Right.
And therefore they could do it in 5 minutes versus the generalist mill worker who could not. And so it's like, hey, and this gets you into like, hey, carve out a niche for yourself and be better than all comers in that area and able to better serve your clients.
Yeah. I've seen it before. Scott on our team, he does a lot of web work, is more on the technical side of things. And it could be the most basic thing. Let's take this, like fixing an image on a website. I could do that. That's very easy. Well, yeah, to you, it's easy. And to you, it takes 2 minutes, takes 5 minutes. To this person, it might have taken them 3 weeks and they still wouldn't have gotten it done. They'd be so frustrated. They'd take their computer and throw it out the window because they can't handle it, right? So there's value in that. And like you said, and there's competence. So first of all, can you get the job done and you can help them do it and then have a team of people around you to get that out there. So I think it's important. And I think you're right to have that book and to have a resource of someone who's been in it and also been around so many other entrepreneurs and small businesses that are out there creating something. That's the beautiful thing of an entrepreneur. You're creating something out of nothing. And then to kind of get through this process of offering your services up to someone else and then say, well, what is that going to cost? Right? Because you can almost charge anything in a lot of different businesses. Some businesses are set in stone, but in a lot of businesses, they're not. And how do you get to that point? And it takes time. And I think that's what you're talking about. You've mentioned it a couple of times already, 2 decades, 20 years. Like you're going through this process and you're here to help tell other people about it as well. And they can learn from you. And that's why it's awesome to have someone like yourself on this podcast and leading a business that we've heard so much about over the years. It's a great honor to have the opportunity to chat with you. And I appreciate your time. And what's the place where they can learn more about you, where they can learn more about FreshBooks, and who's it for?
Thank you, Eric. And listen, it's been a pleasure to be here. So you can find me online. Twitter's probably the air quotes social network that I'm most active on, just at Mike McDerment, or on LinkedIn, but a little less responsive there. If you want to learn more about FreshBooks, and I hope you do, we are a really easy to use invoicing and accounting software that's in the cloud. You can use it on your desktop, mobile phone. And the thing that makes us different is we're not built for all small business owners. So we really focus on service-based businesses. People get paid for their time and expertise, have light inventory needs. We don't really do retail. We don't do restaurants. And that just makes it let's just keep our software be really easy to use. So if you want to save time, get paid faster, look a little more professional, take that saved time and make some more money with it, we're probably a great fit for you.
Yeah. Well, I think it's awesome too, because you talked about it before and about niching down and understanding who your target audience is. And that's a lesson for so many people. You have generalization of who they're talking to, who they're going after, and it's very specific and it's very obvious. And I think that's awesome. And I appreciate your time, Mike. I appreciate your stories. And there's a lot more we can learn about it. I'll direct people to all the different podcasts that you've been on, because you share a lot of wisdom in those as well. It's not just here, but I do appreciate you a little bit introspective. And like you said, sitting down on the couch and talking some things out. So thank you again.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, no, great to be here.
One of my favorite things about CADSource is the opportunity to chat with amazing business leaders and entrepreneurs. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you want to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn or visit us at cadsource.com. Thank you for listening to this CADSource production, Entrepreneur Perspectives, building and protecting your business one podcast at a time. This episode exists because of CADSource. CADSource is your content team. You know how many business leaders need help communicating their story? That's what we do. Content strategy, creation, and distribution for business leaders. This provides opportunities, relationships, and a platform for you and your business. Why do we do this? Because at CADSource, we exist to help you create and share amazing content. And yes, you should have a podcast. We'll help you. Learn more by visiting cadscontent.com.